Hey everybody, this is Jim Grisanzio from the Oracle Groundbreakers team, and I'm here with Chris Saxon from the UK to talk about Oracle Database and a few other things. This is a part of the Oracle Groundbreakers Yatra, India Yatra tour that's going on right now. It's like 2.5, almost 3 weeks worth of content here, and Chris is one of the speakers. Chris, welcome to the program.
Hi Jim, it's nice to be here. It'd be great to be speaking tomorrow and next week. So
Oh, you got tomorrow. Okay. That's
yeah.
good. This is actually the first time that we've met. I've seen you out and about, heard about you a lot, and see you on social media a lot as well. So I saw you were a speaker here, and I wanted to hook up with you because I know you've had some conversations with my colleagues, Bob and Javed, but I wanted to crack at you as well. So you're doing 2 talks here that I see on the schedule, and one is for developers and one is about machine learning. So let's just start there. What are you going to be talking about?
So in the developers talk, it's covering the new features here in Oracle Database 19c for developers. It's one of those things that actually it's a relatively light release in terms of new features, but there were some things which were kind of backported and snuck into it after the release. So there might be some surprises for people, things they're not expecting. But I'll still be covering some of the kind of stuff over the past few releases to kind of really get people excited about what's coming and what they can use, build better, faster applications on that.
Okay, actually, yeah. So build better, faster applications. That's actually what I wanted to talk about a little bit. I see in the title it's for developers. So if you were presenting about 19C for developers versus say DBAs, what would be the distinction?
So there's definitely a fair bit of overlap in kind of topics and things that they cover, but I tend to focus more on the SQL and PL/SQL side of things. So actually kind of writing queries and how that would affect how you build your applications, what kind of things you need to think about. So I think the big distinction is, for me at least, is developers are writing code all the time. That's what developers do, right? So whereas DBAs, most DBAs do write some SQL and some PL/SQL, and often they're called in to kind of help do things like performance tuning, but they're more focused on actually keeping things running, doing the backups and all that kind of stuff, which I don't really get into that kind of thing. I focus more on building applications and writing code, really.
So when a new version of the database is released, is this a big thing for developers, or is it relatively not, or relatively trivial?
It's one of those things. It's always worth seeing what's coming, because there's always something. Different people take different things from each release, depending on what kind of application you're building and what you're trying to do. One thing I'll be talking a fair bit about tomorrow is external tables. So being able to read CSV files and that kind of thing into your application using SQL, which in my experience is a fairly common problem that developers encounter. How do I get these files into my database? But not everyone does that. Not everyone works on that kind of application. So I think for a lot of people, they'll be on slightly older releases. It's thinking, okay, well, what are my challenges now, and can I see what's coming? What's going to help me solve those challenges in the future? And often, just knowing that, okay, I'm on version 12 or something, okay, I can see this is coming in the next release. Maybe it's enough for you to kind of go, we need to upgrade. Not often, sadly, but every now and then, just knowing what is coming can also help you kind of
Prepare.
stop boxing yourself in and saying, build solutions which could take advantage of new features when they come along.
So in terms of upgrading, I mean, is this? I mean, I would imagine, I'm just speculating here, I would imagine that the decision to upgrade is based largely on the size of your organization, right? I mean, if you've got a gigantic organization, presumably wouldn't it just move a little bit more slowly in terms of upgrading?
It's the size of the application, and one of the things that we see a lot is you start out with one database and one application, and then suddenly you've got some reporting that needs to hook into it, and someone else decides that they need that data as well, and suddenly you've got like 10 different applications all talking to the database. So if you upgrade it, then you've got 10 applications to think about in terms of their impact. So usually, vast majority of the time, you upgrade and everything will just keep working. But there's always the risk that something doesn't work quite how you expected. So yeah, there is that challenge as things get more and more complicated, making sure that you can actually get it out. It's something we're working on to try and find ways to help make this process smoother, so it's easier for people to get up to the latest releases and make sure they've got support and things like that.
Okay, that's the size of the application, maybe the complexity of the application. What about the size of the organization? Like if you work in a very, very large enterprise versus a smaller operation in terms of upgrading and making the decision to upgrade?
So I've worked in organizations of all sorts. So my first job was I was a 10-person company, and you talk about decision making. I think there's a lot more personal responsibility, or people are able to take more personal responsibility for decisions when you're in that smaller organization. Partly because you have to kind of keep things moving, and partly there's fewer people to kind of say maybe we shouldn't, or raise objections. Whereas you get into big organizations and there's more kind of compliance things that you've got to do, paperwork, more people who are kind of gatekeepers who might slow things down a bit. Whereas yeah, definitely smaller organizations, it's just generally easier to get things done.
So it's not necessarily a technology issue then?
Not necessarily,
okay.
No. I think for actually a lot of times it's more about your kind of processes, and certain technologies make things easier, some make them harder, but most of the time I think it's really kind of people and processes problems really. And if you think technology are going to solve those, they might help, but they're not going to make them go away.
Right. Okay, so the next talk is on fraud detection with SQL and machine learning. What's all that about?
So this is a talk I'm doing with a friend of mine, Abby Charles Hay. She's the machine learning expert. I'm the SQL guy, and we're going back. Fictional story. We're going back to the land of Westeros and trying to help, Hand of the King figure out who's been taking the Iron Bank's money. So we've got some different approaches to that. I'm looking at how we can use some SQL to kind of encode some business rules. So if this happens, then we'll flag that transaction up, and that works well when you know what the problems are likely to be, or what is likely to be a fraudulent transaction. But criminals are people are quite sophisticated, and they're always evolving. And machine learning can help you adapt and find things that you weren't aware were necessarily a problem, and she'll kind of look at how you can do that, and then we compare and contrast the approaches and look at actually how you can get into the more detail and think about more clearly about which is the right approach in terms of how many instances of fraud did you miss, and how many people did you probably at some point had those alerts where they kind of go, we spotted some suspicious activity on your account. If you're sending those out all the time to people, then you start to switch off, right? And they become useless. So you've got to make sure you're targeting those effectively as well. So it's a good talk. I like it. So
interesting. When you mentioned SQL, you have in your bio, there's actually, no, I'm sorry, not in your bio, actually, it's the background on your Twitter page, magic of SQL or something. So what is the magic involved with SQL? What's the tie there?
So this kind of sort of goes back to when I was joined Oracle. So Stephen Feuerstein set up this developer advocates team, and as part of the interview process, he was talking about like what public speaking experience I had, because I wasn't active on the Oracle user group scene at that point in terms of presentations, and I came out that in the past I I did magic, like amateur magician. And he's like, you should do SQL magic and show cool things you can do with that. And I thought, actually, that's a really neat idea. So I came up with some magic tricks you could do with SQL. So, for example, getting people to pick a card out of the deck. It's table in the database. They update it, and I'll read their mind to see if I can figure out which card it is. So, it's a different take on things. And the idea is to kind of show the principle of some technology, but do so in a way that most people have never seen.
I see. Okay. So do you do that at your conferences as well? Something live?
Oh yes. Yeah. The thing. Well, the mind reading trick it only really works live because you need to have someone who's got to read their mind, right?
Right.
But I've got I've recorded most of them on my YouTube channel as well, so you can watch those and see some cool things you can do with SQL. Cool.
You mentioned actually before we started recording, you mentioned that you up until this year you've been to a lot of conferences. You mentioned like 20 conferences a year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I did 17 trips last year, and it really damn near killed me. I can't imagine doing 20 average every year.
Mm-hmm.
So what's it like for you in terms of your technical, your development and your evangelism and your engagement with the community to be always behind a screen at this point? Because, to be out and about that much, you're generating very, very significant relationships, on the road. And I have found myself that having all these online conferences is handy in one respect because you have access to ready content whenever you want, but the human interaction is pretty poor actually. So I'm just wondering what your experiences are, because you're dealing with engineers all over the place.
Yeah, and in many ways I found it similar to you in that it's the technical content and being able to see the presentations is still great. And I think as an attendee, it's always tricky if you're watching someone else and you're at your desk at home. Temptation to start looking at something else, and that's a downside. And as a presenter, quite often you don't see the audience as when you're virtual, so it's hard to kind of gauge. It's always good to actually be able to look people, see who's paying attention, who's nodding along, and who's pulling a funny face and that kind of thing. So we've got to work with what we've got given the situation we're in, but I'm looking forward to being able to get out and about again. I think my family are enjoying me being around a lot more, at home a lot more. So that, it's always a bit of a balancing act with that as well. So.
How did you get involved with your local Groundbreakers Yatra?
So I've been to the Indian Sangam event a couple of times now. So it's a great event, but it falls like end of the year just after UGE, which is
right. I think it's the following week or so, or like
exactly. I mean, you were saying about 17 kills you that week of UKUG and Sangam. You come home, and so not sure when I'll be doing that again. But I got to know Sai, who's a big organizer for the All India user group, and so when I saw this being virtual, there's very little cost for me in terms of travel effort and things like that. So get involved.
Well, the tour last year was physical, and it was really incredible. I was on 6 of the 10 cities, and
oh wow,
it was really phenomenal. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I was so looking forward. I was preparing for this year because this year they were going to do, I think, 10. Okay. I'm sorry, they were going to do 12 cities this year. It was 3 full weeks that they had planned. So, okay, let's shift gears, talk about Ask Tom. When I was actually moved from Solaris over to this job here in corporate marketing, I never knew what Ask Tom was. I always, and for a long time, it was like for a year, Tom just, and then I finally went to the site and I said, oh, okay, that's what it means.
Yeah.
The Oracle Masters, right? Or the Oracle Mentors. Did you guys change the name recently?
Yeah, so we rebranded slightly recently to the Oracle Mentors. There's been some people concerned about language use and felt that mentors was a better way to represent. I think it's a better way to represent what we're trying to do as well, help people understand how to use the technology better.
Right, and it's more friendly to the community in terms of reciprocal, you can mentor someone that, ambrings people along, so.
Exactly.
I noticed you guys have done a lot. First of all, you generate very serious amount of content. But I thought it was a whole team back there. But you told me it's you and Connor primarily.
It's primarily. There's a few others. Maria Colgan's helped out a little bit with it, and there's neither of us know everything about the database. We've both got some areas which are a bit of a black hole. So there's people we pull in for things like spatial and graph, where it's a bit of a niche technology which we don't necessarily know about. So we try and pull in PMs and things on those, but it's primarily the two of us most of the time. Yes.
Interesting, because I just wanted to bring it up because you generate a lot of content, and it's very, very impressive. And you guys had some conferences recently where you had this stuff at home basically, and what was that about?
The database house party we were talking about.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For my session, I talked with one of the ACE directors, King Berg Hansen, and showed it or walked through some of the solutions he'd actually used in the real world. And I think it's great. Myself and Connor talking about how people should use things, and we can use our past experience as well. But I think it's always useful for the community to talk about how they've used it, because when people who are not working for Oracle might say things that I wouldn't say, perhaps. They may not be quite so favorable about some things, but also they're dealing with this day to day, and there are some things that you only really learn once you doing that day to day, using something all the time in a production environment. Some of the kind of edge advantages or disadvantages may become more apparent in those scenarios. So I think it's great to get people's community feedback, and I think it helps others in the community as well to kind of go, oh, actually, I tried doing something like that, and maybe I can use this to do wherever I'm stuck with.
Mm-hmm. And you guys hold office hours, right?
Oh yes, so we've been doing that for a couple of years now, I think.
Now, is that streamed live where people can interact live?
Yes. Yeah. So every month we have there's different slots at different times. I have a SQL session every month, and people can come on live. I usually have a topic where I'm going to discuss something or other that's interested me, or a question that has come in of people are stuck with. But then people can chip in their thoughts about it, or they've got a specific problem they want to talk through. One of the things that seems quite popular, I've done a couple of times recently, is like live SQL tuning. So someone says, I've got this slow SQL statement. What do I do? How do I make it faster? And just kind of bringing it up and walking through the steps. And then people watching can make their own suggestions or have their own questions about how we could go through this, and I think they're good fun, and people seem to really enjoy them.
Yeah, I've been at conferences with Connor, and he has to duck out at some ungodly hour to do office hours. And I said, what is this office hours bit,
Yeah.
he's linking up everything and his cameras and everything in a hotel room and starting to stream from the road. So very impressive. I just wanted to bring it up because not everyone knows about it. I mean, you guys know about it and your community knows about it, but in case anybody doesn't know about it, it's a fantastic resource. Huge amount of content there. And I just, I've met a few of you guys that are on the team in terms of doing developer evangelism and stuff. You just do a great job, and around the world. So, yeah, Chris, thank you very much for coming by. Appreciate it, and good luck on your talks. You're coming up tomorrow, and you said next week, or is it this week?
Yes, it's next Thursday as well.
Next Thursday as well. Cool.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll get to see you at OGYatra or something.
Maybe we'll see. Hopefully.
Next year. When's the next one scheduled?
In theory. Well, hopefully OGYatra, but yeah, I don't know before that. We'll have to see how things play out between now and then, really.
Maybe sometime next year. Anyway, good luck with everything. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye.